Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. I'll be back in 1 second.
Yeah, take your time, Matt. Great. So I think we're live now here, Matt.
Excellent.
Well, good. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's conversation. I've been fortunate enough to be able to kind of meet Matt Gibson and have several conversations with him over the last couple of weeks. And Matt has, a deep experience working both with manufacturers and in the distribution space in the construction industry. And we've had some really great dialogues around, customer data and data insights and customer loyalty and, customer experiences, and thought it would be great just to, have a conversation here today and be able to share some of his insights. But before we get started, I'm Lincoln Smith. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for HMI Performance Incentives. And we work quite extensively in the building trade industry, working with both manufacturers and distributors, designing programs to engage, their channel partners for behavior change. So anyhow, I really enjoy, hearing Matt's perspective and experience along these lines as well. But before we dive in and have a conversation on this, Matt, do you mind go ahead and just kind of introducing yourself?
Definitely, Lincoln. Thank you. I've had that same pleasure kind of interacting with you over the last few weeks and just getting to know you and the team better. I'm Matt Gibson. I've been in the construction industry for the last 29 years. The first part of that in one-step distribution, the latter half in the manufacturing side and marketing side of the business. I've seen a lot of different incentive-based programs out in the marketplace. And, as I usually say, I have a lot of opinions. I'm not afraid to share them. So was excited to get to connect with you guys and kind of learn more about what you do and brainstorm, and vice versa, get to share some of my insights and kind of what I think I see. So thank you. This is great. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just a conversation here. But, for the listeners that are listening in today, we did want to kind of have a little bit of a structure that's associated with this. And it really is all about, engaging whoever the right point of influence might be. So oftentimes in construction, it is your contractor that's doing an installation of a particular product. And there's a lot of discretion, for that individual on what brand they're going to install and also who they're going to buy from. So with that, depending on if you are a manufacturer or a wholesaler, your intimacy with that customer or contractor is dependent on, again, where you are in the channel. So, understanding who those customers are and the data around them is oftentimes tricky. So the question really becomes, how do we want to approach these customers and engage them in a meaningful way? But, Matt has a lot of experiences working with several different organizations on this topic. So looking forward to, getting your insights today. So what we'll do is we'll break this down into two different chapters. One, I think the first half, Matt, we'll talk about, the distributor relationship, and the data sources. How does a manufacturer acquire the data? And then chapter 2 of today's conversation might be, once you've collected the data on these ideal profiles of the customers, what do you do with it? And, how do you want to manage it? And what kind of resources do you need to glean the most information out of it? So anyhow, we'll kind of chop it into those two chapters. So I guess, if you are, a manufacturer in the manufacturer seat, Matt, what is the best way of collecting data and insights on those contractors or those installers? Can you share just some of your experiences along those lines on your approach?
I think it comes down to, what are you trying to understand? What information are you trying to collect, and why? Like, what is your strategy? What is your approach? And that'll kind of help you in the determining what the best collection process is.
Mhm.
I mean, getting copies of proof of purchase from the contractor will provide you with the most information of any option. But the flip side of that is it's heavily administered, like it's an administrative burden for them. Eventually what I've seen is it can create an administrative burden on distribution as well. So it's about trying to better understand, what is it I can do to make the process as easy to collect that information as possible, and then facilitate that collection into my analytics process and how I'm going to look at that data.
In that instance, yeah, it's more of like a claims process, and we've seen that quite a bit in the industry, where they're submitting an actual invoice of where they purchased that from, Matt, and then what you are in the manufacturer side is you're either having to do some data entry to transpond the information off that invoice into a database, or they will be maybe entering into a form on their own, and then maybe just having an invoice as a backup as proof of purchase. Is that what you're referring to on that, is on the invoice side?
It is. It's I mean, the more successful way to do it is to say, just send me your information and give me some basics that I can work
Mhm.
from to verify.
Mhm. Mhm.
But also, in a lot of these programs, whether it's the manufacturer, whether it's somebody selling chips at the grocery store with a little redemption thing that you can get your money back, breakage starts to factor into that as well. Like, are they trying to create a hurdle such that it's just a little bit too difficult to do, so that a certain percentage of people just won't play ball with the process?
Right.
I remember one manufacturer, this was many years ago, putting collectible tags into the boxes of siding they were selling.
Mhm.
So realistically, for the owner to get incentivized by that, they had to go out to each and every job site their installers were on, root through the trash and collect those tags to bring them back and submit them. I only knew of one individual that actually went to those lengths to do it, and I think he won like 7 of the 15 prizes or something. But it's that sort of thing that you want to think through and go, yes, I may want some breakage in my program, but do I want to make it incredibly difficult to participate? Probably not. I don't want to create a negative customer experience.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And I think that's an example of, the more onerous you make it on those individuals, the less likely that they are to do it. So,
Mhm.
having that proper balance, of what you're trying to do. And
Agreed.
also the incentive or the reward, what is that motivation and that work effort? If I'm going to put in X amount of time or effort, the reward that I'm going to be getting out of this has to be compelling enough for that behavior to take place. So that's
Exactly.
where another balance is.
Agreed.
Good. So yeah, of course, invoice submittal is certainly a process on that. If you find, if you're a manufacturer, and that's one way of collecting data, but what else is another option if you aren't collecting or getting as much data as you'd like? Is there another opportunity to kind of think through on maybe working with distribution?
That's eventually where I've seen some of the programs evolve to, and I think partnering up with distribution, it creates some significant positives and significant sort of I don't want to call them negatives, but some
Hmm.
you lose a little bit of the value added portion of it. You lose a little bit of the loyalty. You're starting to share that with distribution, which is a good thing if that distributor is like a good solid partner of yours.
Hmm.
But if you're sharing that across the entire of every distributor, it may not necessarily be the best thing. But I've found, working with distribution, you capture less information. So if I'm getting the invoice from the contractor,
Hmm.
I can see everything. I can see pretty much, I can glean what type of job was it? Was it new construction? Was it remodeling?
Hmm.
Um, I can see all of my things that I sold them, even ones that might not be on an incentive program. I can see all the products, the peripheral products they're buying to kind of fill out the cart and finish the order. Occasionally, if they bought one of my products and a competitor's product to go with it, I can glean pricing of competitive information from there. When you start to go to distribution, they're more inclined to give you reports because that's easier. It's an easier process all the way around to have reports come showing the specific items that this person or individual or company purchased and giving you that breakdown to go, this is what they've earned for this particular month. But you start to lose that sort of holistic sight of the balance of the invoice. And then that question becomes, is that holistic view of the invoice, is it really interesting to me and can it help me drive my strategy? Or is it just, is it just bathroom reading? Like, is it just something that's interesting to look at, but not necessarily actionable? So.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think that you pull on a couple of good threads there. And, for the listeners, the amount of data that you can work with getting the invoice data allows you a lot more, or allows you to glean a lot more insights. But if you work through distribution, it's going to be easier and it might be filtered in some way and your added value is reduced in some fashion, to the contractor, as Matt said. I do see a lot of times, we've worked with programs, Matt, where we have kind of like an invoice digital reader, kind of an AI technology that allows contractors to take a picture of their invoice and then upload it into an application, and then us to pull off the structured data or put the unstructured data into a structured database.
Mm-hmm.
And it does start to collect SKUs, quantity sold to, pricing, and then also competitive data. But it's amazing how sometimes just because you have the data doesn't mean that you do anything important with it. And that's a downfall sometimes, is that people don't know what to do with all this great data they have to make a proper strategy. But, I think
Agreed.
that's also something that is going to be coming up in conversation, is what to do with it, and how to, act on it once you do have it.
It's 100% agree. I think just a very specific example to that was when I moved into the marketing side of manufacturing. I remember having countless discussions with other marketers in the organization about what was the ratio of squares of our product to the different SKU accessories that came with it. So, what was kind of an average size job, and then how many of this accessory or that accessory, the other, would go with it. I had a real fluent grasp of what that looked like in suburban Chicago, because for 11 years, I stood at a counter or sat on the phone, answered it, talked to a contractor who was ordering X, Y, and Z. And part of my skill set evolved to be, hey, do you need this product or that product, the other product? So I could typically go, yes, I know a typical job is going to be 21, 22 squares. You're going to need, 10 to 12 corners, maybe a few inside corners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're capturing that information off the invoice, which, at one point in my career, we actually hired an intern to dig through invoices. God bless that woman. She did it for 4 weeks of just capturing every detail from every invoice. And then you really could see, this is the average number of squares, and this is how many of this, that, the other go with it. So you really could dial that in further from just Matt Gibson's perception of what suburban Chicago quantities look like that may be inaccurate in other metro markets, to a sort of more holistic view that you could slice and dice by geography or whatever else to really dig into that detail. And then it becomes, why do I need that? What am I using that for? Is it just interesting or is it actionable? So.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the idea, is then from that data and those observations, then what do you do with it? And that, some of them off the top of my head is that you have kind of pricing elasticity. If different regions, have different tolerances for pricing, you might be able to have a better pricing strategy because of those insights. Marketing and positioning and doing bundles, knowing that there might be opportunities for taking share from a competitor that are oftentimes on those invoices, and positioning yourself differently. So, those are just a couple of different examples, though, I think you've done in the past. So it's great.
Agreed. I feel like I'm excited for the advancements in AI and what it's going to be capable of. Because I always said, if you amassed enough data, you should be able to almost identify pricing zones of your competition, kind of what if there are different strategic implementations of pricing nationwide, you should be able to discern that with enough data. I don't know how much, that's probably a lot. I'm not a data
Right.
scientist and I never will be. So I'm my best answer is a lot, but I go, there is a lot of useful information to be gleaned from what you can capture. If you have, if you take that time to imagine what else can I do with this and what would that do to help me? So
Totally. Yeah. And the AI is only as good as the data that it has in able to process. So that's the two pieces is one, you have to have the data input, and then the AI technology, will allow you to make those decisions and observations and recommendations that much quicker. So,
mhm,
you know, and again, that's what today's conversation is if you're in manufacturing, oftentimes you don't have that data. So what's the best process of collecting it and then being able to act on it and market and promote and drive these behaviors.
exactly.
As far as, tell me about, we talked about getting the data directly from the invoice, and that's directly from the contractor. You also talked about maybe getting these data reports from the distributors. Do you have any kind of tips, on, how to, provide value back to the distributor so that they're willing to maybe even provide you that data? What is there? Sometimes they're not very interested in sharing data with manufacturers. So what do you see, as how do you approach that with a distributor to get them to, acquiesce in sharing some of their information?
It's a good question. These programs I've seen in the marketplace, and not just the ones I was involved with, they evolve over time. So at the start, there's an excitement about it on the distribution side. This is an advantage versus competition. Like they don't, either competition didn't have it and you do now, and that gives them something to go out and talk about, or competition had it and you didn't, and now you do. So it gives them something to go out and talk about. I think it creates excitement at the field level,
Mm,
which is followed soon after by um, a distributor or distributors may figure out, hey, is this creating an administrative burden for that contractor or that end user? What if I just every month printed out all their invoices and gave them a copy to mail in? Now I'm doing some value added on the distribution side.
mm,
And one does it, another does it, a few start to do it. And then all of a sudden, there's this administrative burden that every distributor or most everyone is sharing. And they're coming back to manufacturing going, we're not real happy about this. Like you've created this thing. We love the program, but there's this thing involved that we've started doing, but now we're in it. Like, because
mhm.
either I started doing it and now it's a lot of work, or my competitor was doing it. I was losing business, so I had to start doing it. And so what can you do to make that easier? I think what I've found is, number one, best practice wise, you have to think about that administrative burden, and if there's a desired breakage, what that is going to be, and
Mhm.
make sure that it's acceptable, that you've given the field enough of a pitch that they know how to pitch it and go, yeah, I know it's a little bit of work, but X, Y, and Z, you get this benefit out of it. I think from there, it's listening to those concerns. I mean, a voice of customer, which is a whole other thing I could spend hours
Right.
talking about, is a great way to gather and sort of sort through like what are the problem areas, right? Sometimes there's problem areas you just can't solve for, but sometimes there's one you didn't see that if you just take enough time to listen, you can go, hey, if I did this differently or that differently, or just tweak the process slightly here,
Mm.
it makes this person's life that much better. It really fixes things, and kind of
I
takes
think
them out of that funk where they may abandon your products or your program altogether. Um, and then finally, it's at some point being willing to say I may have to compromise on the amount of data I'm asking to collect.
mm,
I may have to try and streamline this process and make it a little bit easier. But I think those are kind of some of the, it's making sure you establish positive relationships with that contractor and with distribution, and then work to maintain those relationships over time and listen to those concerns and try and address them where possible.
Yeah, no, I think that, yeah, that customer experience is really important, and the customer is the contractor and the distributor in that instance as
Mhm.
well. So understanding, both of their needs and what you're asking each of those stakeholders to participate in this particular strategy needs to be kind of audited, and then have, a compelling value proposition that's back to both of them. And, incentives and rewards and rebates are certainly one of those levers. But a lot of times it might be data and insights and information that actually allows your distributor to be even more, strategic or better because of something that you might be sharing back with them.
Mhm.
So that's also another value, that if they understand that you're offering this type of a strategy and you're collecting this type of data, how you might share those insights back to them can also be of deep value. Thinking about it above and beyond just kind of these rewards and incentives, but you're providing business insights, which they're always looking for. So
Agreed.
so I think that's really good. One other topic that I see a lot of times here, especially with manufacturers, Matt, is that they're they're becoming much more aggressive or intentful at marketing directly to the installer or the contractor.
Mm.
So, trying to understand those datas, or all the data to be able to market and promote to, is something that's a trend that's not going to go away. Now, distribution gets a little bit anxious about that because they're fearful oftentimes that they're going to go around them and sell direct, go through a marketplace or sell directly. So I know that there's some fears around that. But when I work with manufacturers, I feel like it's a little bit less about them selling direct. It's more about them knowing their customer and then wanting to drive the communications and the value prop of their particular brand, and not be so reliant on the distribution partner to carry that message. But anyhow, I think that's a trend, and I think that's really one of the most intentful reasons that you see manufacturers becoming more and more aggressive, with trying to communicate and provide value directly around distribution. But it's not to necessarily sell around them; it's to really just trying to communicate and serve them better. That's my opinion. I don't know if you kind of share that opinion or that trend, but just wanted to get your take on that.
I think I I agree with some of
Yeah, that's
it.
fair. Yeah, you're the insider. I'm the outsider. Yeah,
I think distribution in the products I've been involved with, distribution serves an incredibly valuable space.
certainly.
The weight, the size, the scope of the products, like there's direct sale in those categories would be a challenge, but there's also the piece of, in a world where more and more and more information is continually being flowing back and forth, if the contractor is if they are the person that makes the buying decision for the most part, and you're trying to reach downstream and influence them, it's how do I create these value added programs to keep your attention and to keep you involved and to create a buying incentive of sort. I go, monetary incentive program by all means is a one good way, one tried and true old long-standing way to incentivize customers. The balance of that's sort of the other value-added services you can bring. I do feel like depending on which manufacturer it is in which category, some just go right past distribution to the contractor and they want to
Hmm.
try and have that grip there. Some want to go all the way downstream to the consumer, and that's where they're going to spend their energy and their focus and just be the one that pulls the business through. um, I've always found if you have to have that balance. For me, there has to be that balance of, yes, I want to reach downstream and build a relationship with that contractor at
Hmm.
any point in their business cycle, whether they're new, just moving from being an installer to a contractor, or whether they've been in business for an extended period of time. Like I want to have the best relationship with the best quality individuals out there. But if I have poor distribution support behind that, I'm going to struggle with that as well. So I do think there's a nuanced conversation there, but I do agree 100% that you are seeing more and more of these programs, because of all the voice of customer pieces you get, I need more rebates is always I need more leads and I need more rebates is usually number one and number two in some combination. So the manufacturer with the worst voice of customer process still probably knows that someone somewhere wants a monetary contribution being given back to them, or a points program attached to it to incentivize their purchase, and can contemplate how easy it is to implement something like that. So
Yep. No,
the
I
other
agree.
balance of it is what are you trying to draw attention to? Now there's
Mhm.
ongoing incentive programs versus a new product launch or the relaunch of a particular category, or so you may just be temporarily trying to get some pop and buzz around a specific thing you're trying to accomplish. I'm trying to grow in this particular geography, so I'm going to have an additional incentive or something, which comes back to what is your strategy in that particular moment and what are you trying to do? So,
Totally. Yeah, no, you're hitting all the right buttons on that. Is it, always going back to what's the end goal, and then designing the right program and data capture and experience, working backwards on that. But yeah, I think going back to this idea of manufacturers trying to get closer to, the contractor or the installer, or
mhm,
the buyer, whatever term we decide to use. We agree that that's something that's a trend and movement. The intentions of those manufacturers and doing it might differ. So some may be very much actively trying to gain those insights so that they can sell directly. And there are a
mhm,
lot of manufacturers that aren't necessarily, that's not their end game. It really is just about serving and controlling the message more directly than, having the distribution. They're fine with distribution selling or distributing their product, but maybe not marketing their product. And that's where
agreed.
they want to take that into their own hands a little bit more.
Yep.
But you brought up incentives and kind of rebates and promotions and stuff like that. Is there a kind of a key area that you think manufacturers should be investing in 23 as it pertains to, rebate data, or anything along those lines? Are you seeing any trends on that front?
I think a portion of it is, the customer experience element has to be positive. So you
Mm,
have to continually be evaluating, is my program creating more problems than it's solving? And then the other piece of that is the data architecture and what you're capturing, because that's a long-term play. And I go spending money to ensure that, either, the third party vendor you're working with can structure a database to capture some nuanced data such that, months from now you can see some actionable information.
mm,
Or if you have more of an in-house database, how are you structuring that information and tying it to that particular customer, and gathering it in such a way that you can truly see the full extension of the price waterfall,
mm.
from market price down to the last rebate that goes out the door. So I think that's where I would say the focus should be if you're going to invest.
Right, 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 right. And we talked about it earlier, is that of course more data allows you to do more things with it, but it's only when you act on it.
Mhm.
What kind of resources do you think that you should have as a, on the data collection, the analytics side of it, the strategy side of it? What kind of resources, I guess, do you typically see, within a manufacturer that's kind of working with this information that's been gleaned?
I I mean, I think it, I think this is my opinion, but I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of manufacturers are struggling with the integration of their technologies.
Hmm.
So over the last 20 years, they've invested in internal or external technologies to support their business, but most of them don't have these things integrated to one another where they're talking and exchanging that information together. Um, so I feel like that's a big challenge in that sort of area of trying to understand the data itself and what can be done with it and how it ties to customer behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately you're trying to be able to say, I did X and it produced Y result. But without those two things, without properly tying that information together, I think that's the piece I've seen is the most challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And the area that needs the most direct address from the manufacturers. And I think a lot of them are investing in that process now, going, all right, now we have these 8, 10, or 12 things. How do we not just maybe A, get them to talk together, but B, get them to start sharing information such that it gives us a broader picture of the marketplace and what we can do with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think those resources, you do need to have the right technology and integrations, and then the right people, being able to provide the analysis and recommendations around it.
Agreed.
One of the things that, I was thinking, you talked about business results as it pertains to this data. I think, getting as much data that's appropriate on the customer profile is really important. Of course, there's kind of demographic information, and then historical, sales or installation information. And a long-term program allows you to collect that information, and then you can start to see trends in year over year, month over month, week over week, results. And then you can also then start to overlay promotions or incentives or rebates, and then see how those behaviors may have been impacted on those particular customer profiles that you've communicated with. So that's where it really gets exciting, is that when you do have that history, and then you can pull these different levers and see what the results are. So it allows you to kind of make better decisions in the future on what those offers might look like.
Agreed. I think that's and tying to that, I go, and you talked to it, but I go, it's segmentation. Really being able to take your customer database and start to segment and go, all right, there's this category of individuals, this one, and this one. And then starting to see in those different segments that you've developed, who's the anomaly in a positive way that you want to better understand, and who are the anomalies in a negative way that aren't behaving like most of that cohort does. And then why, like you can drive to why are they not doing, if 90% of that cohort is submitting for product X and 10% isn't, even though that incentive is there, why? Like, are we just not, like, what you can get to the bottom? I can make up reasons, but you can get to the bottom of that why, which
Right.
helps you to be a better marketer and helps you to more fully empower your sales team to understand, how do I convert a portion of that 10% that we're just not capturing. So
Exactly. Yeah, it allows you to kind of serve them in a way, or put your value prop and frame it in a way that resonates with them, that changes their behavior. In this case, behavior is increasing their share of wallet spend, as an example. Or it could also be reminding of the added value services that you provide them, or your distribution partner provides them, and helping them, maybe even lower the cost to serve by educating them on other ways of interacting or buying that particular product through omni channels or whatever the case is. And that's where the data gets exciting, is not just what they're buying, but maybe how they're buying it, and what they're bundling it with, and then what offers did they take advantage of. And that becomes very holistic, kind of approach to future incentives and engagement tactics that you might want to offer.
exactly. Agreed.
That's great. You've done a lot with rebates. That's a little bit less part of our business. We do more, incentive, traditional incentives, loyalties, promotions, tangible and experiential types of offers. But we do also, provide some rebate instances. But you touched on that a few different times. What do you think? Do you want to just kind of touch on that? I know that was something that you and I chatted about a little bit, but what can you do with the rebate data, or Anything else you want to kind of share on the rebate, topic in general?
No, it's interesting. I think you mentioned I'm talking a lot about the dollars versus like the more tangible
Hmm.
experiential things. I think there's a tremendous amount of value to that experiential piece. I go,
Hmm.
if I'm giving you $1 a unit for something, you may remember you're getting $1 a unit. Sometimes people don't, like they don't. But I go, I've seen very wildly successful programs involving customer trips or
Hmm.
uh, incentives with trucks or ATVs or things like that. I go, if there's an end goal you're trying to build up to, I remember one in particular where it was a vacation program,
Hmm.
probably 20 some years ago. And we had customers that hadn't bought from us for a good half of the year, pushing orders through our system in August, September, October, November, because they wanted to make sure they didn't just get one trip, but they got 2 trips so both of their superintendents could go or something like that.
Right.
So I go, there is again, voice of customer. If you understand what can potentially incentivize the customer,
Hmm.
and then you have a strategy for what you're trying to accomplish and build it appropriately, I go, I think that in a way can create more memorable, I remember that trip I got from manufacturer XYZ. I don't know. I remember the dollar they gave me for that
Right.
unit I bought.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, the way that we look at it too, as in the context of this conversation is that, in distribution, so it goes through the manufacturer or the distributor, whoever that target audience is in your channel, you have to
Mhm.
have, obviously a great product, a great service, and it has to be priced properly. And you have to
Mhm.
have your pricing strategy nailed down to be competitive in the market.
Yep.
So, I feel like rebates and spiffs are all part of, a lot of times that compensation and that pricing strategy that has to be addressed. And then what you do is you layer on, other aspirational uh, incentives and marketing and engagement tactics to gain that mind share that
Mhm.
helps drive brand affinity and that share of wallet spend. And that's where you start to kind of have these other incentives, loyalty programs or promotions or incentive trips there because when it always comes down to it, we're humans and we're irrational with a lot of our decision making. So, you know what, we're going to find the right product, that has the right specifications at the right price. That's the logical part of our brain. But then there's always kind of what's in it for me, and how do I feel about that particular brand or that particular experience. And the incentives can really kind of help out on pulling on that emotional tie to their decision making. But
Exactly.
yeah, it all comes back to the data and the segmentation, and then what you're willing to offer in order to collect that.
Yep.
Collect. Um, this is great. I think we're kind of at the conclusion here of our time, Matt. But there, before we conclude here, what can you kind of summarize? Just based off of what we chatted about here, and again, just to kind of reframe it. You're either a manufacturer or a distributor, targeting a contractor or installer or a buyer. And what are the key elements that you think, if you put your strategy hat on or your management hat on, when you want to start to target that individual as it pertains to data? What are some of the key takeaways that we talked about here, or maybe even missed?
I mean, I think if I think about key takeaways, just number one, it's what are you trying to accomplish?
Hmm.
What is your goal? What is your strategy? Or how does this thing that you're trying to do tie to or better enable your strategy? Like it's a critical piece. If all you're doing is going out just to do something or to match somebody else, you can be throwing money at the wind, right? Like
Mm.
it's just not necessarily what you should be doing or trying to do. Um, from there, it's having a good understanding of the customer, both, whether they're direct or indirect, and how this will impact them, from that administrative burden, um, and how it factors into their business. You have to have a strong understanding of their business and how it works for you to be able to go, okay, I can build a program like this structure that we can float out into the marketplace and work to drive that behavior we're looking for. And third, having the right team behind it is critical. I go, yes, you need people that love data, but you need people that love customers to have a super positive experience. You need people that are passionate at solving problems and making sure the customer goes away with a positive outcome. You need people that are curious and that want to, it's not about the data itself. It's about what could I do if I understood more about this data, or given what I have in this landscape of data, what could I possibly better understand, or how could that tie together to something? And then finally, it's just strong communication of the program itself, ensuring that it's clear, it's easy to understand, it's concise, and that the people you're trying to reach are getting that information in a way that's easy to consume and makes it logical and easy for them to join up with a program of that type. So I think those would be kind of my key takeaways.
Yeah, no, I think those are great. I like when we were chatting and you just mentioned it right now, the whole idea of having a certain segment of your team that is really customer centric and problem solvers, and they understand the ultimate goal, the business goal, and they're curious on trying to find ways to solve whatever that goal is, or achieve that goal, I should say, and being really customer centric along those lines is really key. And I also agree with what you just said. There is a lot of times you might have a great strategy, but if it's not marketed and promoted, and the right stakeholders understand in an easy way we're trying to accomplish and what's in it for them, it could fail. So another really great takeaway there.
Exactly. Agreed. I always kind of think that by the time that customer reaches somebody at the corporate team, they've probably vented about this to 3 or 4 other people along the way, and now they're really mad. So it's
Right.
using all of that to build to go, I want people to not have to have that call with me. I want things to flow smoothly, but if I have that right team in place, when it does make it up the hill, they're going to wind up with a positive experience as they come out of that. So, yep.
That's great. Well, good. Well, hopefully, those that listen, and we have, a little article that you helped produce on this particular topic. But, if anyone's interested in getting a hold of Matt or myself, we'll have our contact information at the end of this interview. But, Matt, before we leave, any last little takeaways that you wanted to offer? Otherwise, we'll start to conclude here.
Just thank you so much for the time to have this conversation. And, I anyone who's made it this far in the discussion, I wish you the best of luck. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to provide advice, as long as we don't compete with one another. But I've definitely enjoyed these conversations with you and your team, just to kind of both understand the pitfalls you've seen and the ones I've seen, and kind of how to make things better. So thank you.
That's great, Matt. Well, hey, thanks for the conversation and sharing all your insights and expertise with the listeners today. So
Thank you.
thank you very much.